In episode 146 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Doron Hanoch and discuss his book, The Yoga Lifestyle. The show notes for this episode are posted at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/146. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Doron Hanoch describes himself as a modern yogi, a flexitarian, and a joyful yoga teacher. He founded Doron Yoga in Palo Alto, California. You can learn more about Doron at doronyoga.com. So Doron, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thanks for having me.
When I got your book, a lot of times I say, okay, I can get through a book in a day. And that's typically my pace when I'm reading a health or fitness book, is I'll literally go through them in a day. That didn't happen with your book. It took me a little bit longer than a day. And it wasn't just the volume, because it is a nice thick book. It's got a lot in it, but there was a lot of things in there that just I literally stopped and pondered it, and I don't do that a lot when I read a book. A lot of times I read a book and I get the key points and I move. But with your book, there was a lot of reading and pondering. So I really appreciate that about your book.
Great. I'm really happy to hear that.
And so, as we talk about the yoga lifestyle and the flexitarian method, which again, all of these were kind of like, they just kind of resonated with me. As I get a little bit older, I kind of look at the fitness modalities that I've done in the past, with the bodybuilding and the running and those were good, and they were good for me at the time I was doing them. But as I get a little older, I'm really starting to recognize the value of things like, Qigong, Tai Chi, and particularly yoga as a means of fitness. But, I think it's one of the things that a lot of us don't really recognize when we first hear about yoga or start getting into yoga, is that there's a lot more to yoga than just doing the poses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nice thing about yoga is that it lures people because they feel like, I'll do a little yoga, I'll get a little more flexible, a little fix my back pain or my hips. And then as they go into it, they suddenly discover the whole breathing aspect or the whole mind training of it. And as they go through the exercise, which most exercise will give people maybe a sense of relaxation or some extra benefits beyond cardio, but through yoga, people start to really then ask questions about, what am I doing? How am I doing certain things? Why am I doing them? And so it just brings an overall much greater, wider range of happiness to people beyond just the physical health of stretching or strengthening.
And so I kind of got into the book, it was kind of one of those wake-up calls, and I really enjoyed this, is, as far as actually starting a practice, you use the term show up. Can you take a little bit of time to kind of explain that because again, I think that a lot of times people don't understand how important showing up actually is.
Well, for myself, I'm a very diligent, lazy person. And so I realized that, I used to be really hard on myself and say, okay, if I can't do all this, then I'm not doing anything. And I would then beat myself up the whole day for not doing stuff. And so I realized that the first and most important step is just to show up. And so I would just show up, let's say, to my yoga practice. I would just come to the mat without any expectations and saying, okay, put your yoga clothes on, sit on the mat and see what happens. And then I would show up, and then maybe I would say, okay, just do one sun salute, one little stretch, just do a few breathing exercises. And before I knew it, it was like a rusty engine that was starting to move and starting to go. And as it started to drive, suddenly it felt good. Oh yeah, I'll add this. And so before I knew it, I was doing a full practice. But if I didn't show up, if I found the excuse that I just needed to eat something or just needed to stay on the computer or whatever else it may be, then nothing would happen. And so I'm always seeking for the most practical ways to make me practice, to actually make me have an easy time having a healthy and happy life. And so showing up is really the first and most important thing that anybody can do, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think that, again, I had not really attributed to yoga so much, because again, my first forays into yoga, I walked into the room and they're like, okay, get into this pose and get in that pose. And I was like, I thought this was about flexibility, but it's probably, in some cases, it can be more about strength. But I think what I didn't fully recognize at that point was that yoga is a practice that's really kind of designed to help you get to know yourself. And so there's a whole system that you talk about in the book called the Dosha System. So could you take some time to kind of explain what the Dosha System is and how that works for us?
Of course. So the Dosha Systems comes from Ayurveda, which is like a sister practice of yoga. They complement each other. And it's a really important way to learn about our body type, about our tendencies, about what will throw us out of balance easily and what will keep us in balance. And so if I know that my, just in general tendencies since I was born, right, things that don't really, really change are one way or another, then I can have a lot more awareness to say, okay, this is my style, this is my type. Here I'm going to be more likely to suffer later. So I have to pay attention. So the Dosha Systems includes, it kind of goes according to the elements of nature, and it, to simplify things a lot, it says, well, we all have three basic things, the earth, water, and fire. And if we recognize the more or less like how much of each I have in me, then I can start understanding my tendencies. So we have the Vata, which is air, the Pitta, which is the fire and water, and the Kapha, which is earth or earth and water. So like the Vata people will be more the airy people, very creative, very spontaneous, fun people. It's great to have them as friends. They'll want to take us out for dinner and go party and dancing all night long. They're also the people that tend to forget where they put their keys and be a little restless and can't sit still. And sometimes we call them astronauts, right? Because they're floating around and like, woohoo! They're the skinny people, the classic dancer body looking like thinner hair, always cold hands and feet. And so, there's good and there's bad, and it depends if we're in or out of balance, then we can know. Even people that don't have a lot of Vata, because Vata is the movement, then what happens is that the movement controls all our movement in the body, including our minds. So when people have 16 pages, 16 windows open on their browser and trying to talk on the phone and do two other things at the same time, that, for example, will increase a lot of Vata. So today, a lot of people suffer from Vata imbalance just because of the way the social media and cell phones, smartphones work. And we really, if we understand when it is that we're going out of Vata, we learn to use this technology in a way that's more sustainable and keeps us happy, and we don't go a little bit over the cuckoo and forget about things. And then there's the Pitta, and the Pitta is the fire. They are the A types. They're the fiery people, the go-getters. Their favorite thing in the world may be to make lists. No, one thing more favorite for them is to cross off things on their list. So yeah, those are people that have the medium build. They're pretty strong. They're athletic. They digest foods really quickly. Just don't let them go out of balance because they'll get a bit angry. And that's not always so much fun. And then we have the Kapha, which is the earth people. And the earth people usually have bigger bones, thicker hair, big eyes. They're kind of the sweet people, really good to have one as a best friend because they're awesome listeners. They'll always be there for you. They're very loyal, which can mean also that their loyalty, if they're out of balance, that they can't let go of stuff. So they'll have lots of attachment either to stuff or to relationship or jobs that they need to let go of and they can't. So in those cases, the Kapha person needs to really remember that's my tendency. How do I work through this? How do I see if I actually need to take a step and get away from what I'm holding on to? So that's like a very, very brief overview. And in my book, I wrote a book, The Yoga Lifestyle. And in this book, I talk a lot about how to understand what it is that I am, what is my constitution or my dosha, and then what throws me out of balance, what brings me back into balance, lifestyle, yoga, food, so that really the beauty of this system is that it's very empowering, right? I don't need to go necessarily to a doctor to tell me, hey, this is what's going on with you. I can start to know, at least in basic things, right? Not in serious things, but in basic things, I can have more of an idea of where I tend to go out of balance and how to actually fix it.
And so it's really, in a sense, it's just being mindful of your needs and then making sure that you're living a lifestyle that kind of provides for who you are.
Absolutely. I mean, it's totally like tailoring it for each and every person, right? So this is not a one size fits all. It's not one diet or one yoga style, or it's really, like you said, recognizing this is what my needs are, except sometimes people don't really know it. So when they do one of these dosha questionnaires, they get a little better sense of, oh, you know what? I didn't notice. This is really when I go out of balance, and just like a habit that I do for the past 20 years. So a lot of times having a tiny bit of help from the outside helps us recognize where it is that we go out of balance. And then, what are the tools to come back into it?
And that's totally cool. In the essence of time, I'd like to pick one and just kind of have you talk me through what are the things that would keep someone, kind of in balance, and what would keep them out of balance. Let's say the Pitta dosha, because I think I fit that criteria. So this was one that was particularly interesting to me.
Absolutely. So the Pitta people, like we said, they're like go-getters. And so that means that a lot of them lose their hair a little quicker than others, or it turns gray quicker.
Did you see my picture?
Of course not. But that's a sure sign for Pitta, right? It really is. And so they're great because if they need to take on a project, they're full force on it. The only problem is because they have a lot of fire and they go for it, that they sometimes burn out. So Pitta people need to really, really be careful with overdoing stuff, right? It's great. They have lots of enthusiasm, lots of passion. It's awesome for teamwork. They'll be the leader type. But again, somebody needs to watch out that they actually take a break and they go drink water, or they go for a walk, preferably in nature and not between the office and the meeting room. And so Pitta people get out of balance when they are in competitive environments, right? Yoga is great for them as long as it's not a competitive yoga, which technically shouldn't happen, but that does happen. They get out of balance when they work too hard, when they don't know how to stop and they work, way, way more hours than they should. When they get overly passionate about whatever it may be, they go too far, whether it's a relationship too quickly, right? A relationship, a job, a project, and then they lose steam before they actually needed to, and they won't complete the project if they go too fast. So some of the ways to help Pitta people is to give them non-competitive environments, right? So if they were working out, if they're taking care of health, in a place where they're doing it with other people, not necessarily as a game. Even if they were going to play ping pong or tennis or something, better for them not to keep score, right? If they know that they're about to win or lose, it just increases stress for them more than it will increase to anybody else. So anything taking away, counting, winning, things like that really is helpful. And they also benefit from drinking water and just cooling down. So hot environments are really bad for them. Too long in the jacuzzi when it's really hot and humid outside. So just finding ways to, if it's too hot, go inside. Don't do exercise when it's midday. Do it more in the evening or the morning. Go up to the mountains if possible. Jump into the ocean or a swimming pool, right? Cooling down is great. They can also cool down with food. So ice cream is, I'm not supposed to say this, but it's really good food for them because according to Ayurveda, and I kind of don't agree with this 100%, milk, dairy is good for Pitta. So hopefully people know the good quality, right? The organic grass-fed, blah, blah, blah. So a better quality milk, or even if it's coconut milk, that's awesome. And then eating stuff that's cold, not ice cold, but like ice cream or slightly cold water, adding a little raw food to the diet, because that's cooling versus cooked food. So just anything that's cooling is really, really good for them. And then the last thing I would say is really taking breaks. Even if the break means stepping outside to the yard and staring at a flower. They're very aesthetic people. They love aesthetics. They usually take really good care of their bodies. And so they really need to enjoy something beautiful. And nature is a great way. It's all around us. And again, if somebody just steps out for a moment and sees it, then that's really fantastic and can help them calm down. With that, they can even look at a picture of a lake or of water. I mean, it's definitely not like real water, but water has such a soothing effect that even if they see a picture of it or hear a sound of it or have a trickling little waterfall in their office, those things can really help soothe them and keep them going longer without the burnout.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking, you were talking about the competitiveness of it. And, I took up CrossFit for a little while, and then, just kind of the competitive nature of it. I never wanted to write my score on the board. I actually avoided writing my score on the board because I felt uncomfortable with it. Not that I was ashamed or, say, okay, I want to see. I just inherently it just felt wrong to me, felt bad to me. So I always avoided the scoreboard, but that didn't keep me during the workouts or to really kind of be just focused on doing more as a function of the competition of it. And I ended up injuring myself on a deadlift because, again, I was in that competitive nature of I want to be the highest deadlift here. If I don't do anything, that deadlift is the one I wanted. And so just, again, kind of being in what you had said, out of balance here with this, it led to an injury for me. So I think there is a lot to be said about understanding who you are and how you're going to react to certain things and trying to keep yourself from, I guess, the tendencies that would happen when you're out of balance.
Absolutely. Because what really happens is if I didn't, before I knew this, as somebody that has Pitta, I thought that any competitive environment was good for me because I liked it, because I wanted to compete. But later on, I realized that I was getting injured or that I was just living in too much stress because I really wanted to make it and to do better and better and better, which in general is a good quality to a certain level, as long as we don't push beyond it. So yeah, absolutely. That's why it helps that we understand our real tendencies.
A lower back injury is again, that's a good time to figure it out. So if I'd had your book a year ago, boy, would I would have saved myself in pain. But I'm better now. So, again, it's kind of one of those things where, like I said, yoga is much more appealing to me now because I do see it as kind of that opportunity to get the strength and the mobility without as much risk of injury, particularly if you have a good instructor that's guiding you. But if someone wanted to start to explore yoga, what would you say some of the benefits of yoga are for them to consider this as a practice?
So some of the things that are obvious, and you even mentioned some of them, are definitely flexibility. And I even like to think of it as mobility more than flexibility, because it's not necessarily about, okay, I can put my leg behind the head, but it's the fact that I can move in any direction, in any way, which as people do get older, it really helps both in eliminating or preventing any kind of aches and pains that may arrive. And also, even I've seen it with my mom, doing a little bit of yoga helped her have better balance, helped her save her from falling, and she can catch herself better. So the flexibility helps on a lot more ways than just being flexible. Yoga has, I think, more than what people realize, quite a strong strength part to it. And it really requires quite a bit of strength and sometimes stamina. It's not an exact replacement for cardio, but it definitely is an amazing strengthening thing because there's a lot of body weight that's resting on other body parts, which means that we're strengthening our bones. So it's really important for that as well. The breathing part is, I can't even emphasize that enough because, well, many of us take that as for granted, right? Okay, breath, I have it. But most human beings use about 10% of their lung capacity, and it just decreases as they grow older. So when we learn to deepen our breath, when we learn to use our full capacity of the lungs, then we have better oxygen. Our mind and brain works far better, and all of our cells work a lot better for a much longer duration. And so that's super duper important. And the last part of it is the mind training. Yoga, a lot of the time, depending on the teacher, will really emphasize focus. Where am I looking? What am I looking at? How am I being? And so I will learn to really be present. And the more I'm present, the more I actually part of reality. I'm calmer, I'm more focused, and I don't go into stories in my head, which helps me on all levels of life, including communication, relationship, and even work.
Well, I'm sold, but but now you got into a concept again. I had always thought of yoga, like you said, it was predominantly the physical and the breathing. But you introduced me to something that I wasn't familiar with before I read your book, and it was called Pranayama. Could you kind of give us a brief definition of what that is and then some of the benefits of it?
So in India, beyond like the regular physical body that people mostly consider in the West, they really think of prana, energy, as very important to the body. And they say, hey, you have all this physical body, but you really have this energetic body. And most of us feel it and even know about it, even though we don't necessarily go and get an X-ray to see what our prana levels are. And so yoga has developed this whole system of different breathing exercises that are not necessarily done when we do the physical movement of the body, what we call asana, but we do it sitting down on a chair or on a cushion, and we practice different breathing techniques. Some are more heating, some are more cooling. And I'll just mention one super easy one that's not even really regarded as a pranayama, but I wrote about it and I teach it because it's super useful, just to give an example. So I call it the 1 to 2 breathing. And all it is breathing, inhale, and exhaling double the length of the inhale. So super easy, right? I breathe, I count 1, 2, 3, and I exhale to 6 very slow. And that, for example, physically activates our parasympathetic system, which helps our immune system, which helps us relax. So for people that have a hard time sleeping, I give them to do that, and most of them can't even do 10 of them because they fall asleep, even though normally they wouldn't. Their whole body relaxes, and their mind is much more focused and present. So pranayama helps on many, many levels of the energy of moving both energy and breath and oxygen in the body. And so it becomes one of the almost more important practices as people in India traditionally past 40 and 50. This becomes almost more dominant practice than what we know of here as yoga practice.
Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, it's with the daily stresses that we kind of go through and all the things that are going on, kind of taking that time to have the breathing. And it's one of the things that I've kind of learned over the years is that if you want to stop your mind from running wild, it starts with the breath. And if you're mindfully breathing as you would be in that exercise of the in 1 and out 2 counts, that that you're literally in the moment. You can't do that without focusing on just that. So it's a great exercise to kind of get your mind clear. And like you said, yeah, I would imagine that most people trying to do that while they're laying in the bed in the dark are very likely to fall asleep within a short period of time. And like I said, probably, like I said, within about 10, without about 10 breaths, if, they truly cleared their minds and they were tired, that's definitely going to happen for them. So again, this is a great book for a lot of different reasons. One is the education that you get about what all this is and the way that it's worded, the way that it's structured. It's kind of giving you everything that you need to understand yoga, to understand what these things are. But you also have the poses in here illustrated. So, someone that doesn't have access to a yoga instructor nearby can at least use these diagrams to make sure that they understand the movement that you're asking them to do the pose, and basically can emulate it using that. So again, to me, this is a very complete guide, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you. Yeah, I ended up putting all the poses there and even guiding how to get into the poses, because even people that do go to yoga classes many times happen really fast, and there's a lot of information happening in an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. And so if somebody goes and looks at these poses and tries to do them at home and follows the guide, then even if they were either doing a home practice or going to a yoga studio, either way, it will help them tremendously having correct alignment. And for me, these whole practices, they're only worth it if they're sustainable. They're only worth it if we can do them for the long run, right? Any practice that we're doing, if we end up getting hurt, is not really worth it. So that's why I put the pictures, and I tried not to find the best model with the best alignment, but really find something that's the most practical and real, that people can actually look at it and identify themselves and their bodies and use it as a practical tool to start practicing yoga or to deepen their yoga practice.
Yeah, because I know that was one of the challenging things is the instructor, calls out the pose, and 90% of the people who've been to the class, they already know where they're going and where this is going. And I'm like looking around like, okay, let's see what she does and then see if I can get into that position. And so I think, having a guide like this where you can go in and kind of start learning the poses on your own, or afterwards, at least use it as a kind of a way to go back and say, I want to learn that pose and work on that pose on my own a little bit better. Again, great opportunity to do this. I really enjoyed the book. It's called The Yoga Lifestyle. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, Doron, where would you like me to send them?
Doron Yoga, D like David, Oron Yoga. And doronyoga.com is my website. Joining the newsletter is awesome because there's just lots of information. I try to supplement the book with lots of videos and other articles and recipes even, because this whole thing includes also food and recipes in it. Or if that's not something that they're really loving, then going to Doron Yoga on Facebook and liking that is another great option to connect. But those are probably the two best places to stay in touch. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure that those links are in the show notes for this. It's going to be at older.fitness/146. And Doron, I really appreciate you coming on today. This has been a great conversation. And again, I really enjoy the book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
If you enjoyed today's episode, would you please share it with friends and family by sending them to the link 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/146. Thank you. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet with Cherie Samuels and discuss her book, A Funeral for My Fat, My Journey to Lay 100 Pounds to Rest. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.